Well, welcome back. And joining me for a look at the day's markets action is Viv Govender from Rand Swiss Offshore. Thank you so much for your time, Viv. I guess the greatest thing about today is the Rand being back below 18 Rand against the US dollar, even trading just below 17 Rand 80 against that currency. What has given the Rand wings today?
I think the big news today has probably been the China stimulus. Obviously, when we use China as one of the big trading partners, and especially in terms of resources, and if the Chinese are going to be basically trying to stimulate that economy as strongly as they basically are intimating, we would be seeing the demand for resources rise, and that's one of the things we are seeing today. And that would obviously translate, of course, into more exports for South Africa, and therefore, a stronger rand.
Well, I mean, talking about China, we did see Nvidia's shares, they're dipping about 2%. Of course, that company having become the bellwether for the markets. And it's because there's an investigation that Chinese authorities are doing on the company. Just tell us more about that.
Yeah, they're trying to investigate the monopoly practices. But I think the real big thing about Nvidia is that it can't sell its best chips to China. The US government has pretty much banned any kind of AI chip sales to China, or chips that can be used for the high-end training of models, etc., to China. The Chinese are unable to basically produce them as well because they also can't buy the machines used to produce them from a company called ASML. And so that means that the Chinese have to develop their own local industry. They are making some progress, some remarkable progress, some people do say, but they're still maybe a year or two behind what's available from NVIDIA. I think this may be just one way of punishing NVIDIA for following the US in terms of basically banning sales to China.
All right. We'll talk about sales. We did have Sibanye Stillwater. They're announcing a sale of its Beatrix 4 shaft. Of course, that has its the Besa uranium project for an amount of 500 million rand. Of course, that's a share and a cash offer. And I'm wondering, because it also says that they will be maintaining production exposure. Just talk to us about that.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think that this shaft was being placed under care and maintenance last year because the gold price was low and the uranium price was also a bit depressed. The prepaid price has recovered a little bit, so that's one thing that's positive for this going forward. I do think in terms of uranium demand going forward from here, it's probably going to be a bit higher than it was historically, just because, especially in the US, there's been a much more positive view taken on nuclear power than it was in the past, and maybe we could be seeing more production come into place. Nuclear power has been, to a certain extent, under huge negative sentiment ever since we had the Fukushima disaster in Japan several years ago. We saw Japan closing down some of its plants, Germany, etc. as well. But I think right now with the current environmental issues debating to a certain extent, and people looking at the instability of some other sources of energy, nuclear is recovering, and therefore I do think that uranium probably will be a longer-term bet that's reasonably good.
Viv, I know that we didn't really talk about this, but I quickly just want to maybe get a view from you, because I did see that Exxaro also participated in this rally, the commodities rally that we had today. And of course, we know the leadership gymnastics that they have been going through recently. At this point, does there not seem to be any concern from investors in terms of what could be the outcome of that? Or right now, Exxaro is just buoyed by China's stimulus and really just the commodity cycle that we could see?
I mean, year to date, the stock price is still down 11%. And so though we are recovering today about 5%, almost 6%, we are still seeing a relatively depressed price for the year. So the share price is bouncing off what investors might be considering to be a bargain level. And if you look at the share price over the last, I would say, 5 years or so, it's been pretty stable within a certain range. And so I do think that the market is looking overall at the the demand for the product as opposed to anything else.
All right. Well, let's go into tiling. Italtal releasing a 5-month voluntary sales update. They do talk about a kind of transition of consumer confidence from subdued to improved. We see quite a mixed picture in the sales metrics between the retail and manufacturing divisions. I did see, though, that the share price had an uptick of almost 1.5%. Just talk to me about your thoughts on Italtal's performance so far.
Yeah, look, I mean, we are seeing a bit of recovery coming through. They are saying, people are looking a bit more positive. The consumer sentiment numbers are increasing. But I'll go back to the GDP number we got, just a few days ago. We need to be seeing some, obviously that was dependent on the agricultural sector, but even taking the agricultural sector out, overall growth in the country wasn't going very well, just barely positive. So I do think that we are seeing some recoveries from the consumer. We are seeing some consumer sentiment increasing, but even with declining interest rates, that would help, of course, people that own homes, etc., with more disposable income. We need to be seeing an overall uptick in GDP before we start, I think, really believing in some of the longer term positive outcomes for the company.
All right. Well, Viv, let us get to your stock pick for today. What are you choosing?
I'm looking at Eli Lilly. I think this is a pharmaceutical company, and though it has been depressed, recently, ever since the election of Donald Trump, because of fears around some of the stuff happening with regards to RFK, who's talking about going after pharma companies. Recently, it's had some of its drug in the weight loss sector really doing really well. And these weight loss drugs, I think, are the new gangbuster products in the pharma sector. And we're likely to see use expand, especially by governments, because not only do they make you lose weight, they also increase your lifespan to reduce things like diabetes and other kind of negative metabolic diseases. And so I think that I do like the company, especially after the recent fall. And they also are partnered with Google in terms of its Alphabet with a company called Isomorphic Labs. It's a partnership with these companies based on AlphaFold from DeepMind at Google. That could result in quite a bit of developments going forward for the pharmaceutical sector.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time and for your analysis on what has moved investors' money today, Viv. That was Viv Govender from Rand Swiss Offshore.